Okay, I think there's probably a few folks that are still coming, but I want to go ahead and get started just so I can be respectful of your time. The question that I've had is, how long is this going to last? And I don't know, honestly. I don't know. Here's my guess. My guess is probably about 90 minutes, but I'm here to answer questions and all that, so I'm not going to be rushing you out at any specific time. We do have some folks coming over to our house this evening, so I do have to go home and help my wife prep for that. So at some point I will have to sneak out of here, but the goal today is to just rain down information on you, but not to overwhelm you, right? We could go in this deep dive talk on physiology and all that, and you're gonna walk out of here going, I don't really know what he said. I'm sure it's useful, but what do I do with it, right? So the real goal is to have you leave here with some practical tips and advice that you could apply this afternoon and start improving your nutrition, okay? And so before we even go into all of that, I just want to talk about, I think we all know, you're all here, you signed up for this, you probably value this idea of improving your nutrition, but I just want to kind of put some numbers to this. Why is this such an important topic, right? And what we know right now is that in the US, I can give you numbers for the US, but know that these numbers are relevant throughout the world because the issues that we're seeing here are spreading throughout the world, right? So what we know is that 70% of all deaths in the US are due to chronic diseases, diabetes, cancer, heart disease, Alzheimer's, things like that. We also know that many of those disease states are largely, I'm not saying completely, but largely preventable or manageable through our lifestyle choices, right? Through diet, through exercise, and through other things that we do throughout our lives to try to be healthier, or unfortunately what we see is the trend is that we end up not being healthier, right? Through our lifestyle choices. So we know that 70% of deaths in the US, come on in, there's plenty of seats up front, but
These aren't footrests?
No, they're seats. Well, that one's a footrest. That one's a footrest, but all these others are open for seating, right? So 70% of deaths are due to chronic disease. We know that 80% of healthcare costs come from managing chronic disease. 3.7 trillion with a T dollars per year. That's what we spend in the US on chronic disease, right? It's 20% of our gross domestic product. I'm not an economist, so I can't even tell you what that means, other than it's a lot of freaking money. And if we could improve that, imagine, and it doesn't matter what side of the political spectrum you're on, imagine if we could improve that, what we could do for our general economy, right? And we're always talking about how bad the economy is. Here's an opportunity to have an impact on 20% of our gross domestic product, $3.7 trillion, right? It's an outrageous sum of money, and it's an outrageous problem. And the crazy thing is that we live in a time right now where we know more about the human body than we've ever known at any time in the past, right? We know more about the human body. We have more ways of fixing the human body, yet if you look at the state of health, it's not getting better. It's actually getting worse. We're not healthier than our ancestors, okay? So that's kind of the global issue. Why is this such an important topic? Because it is. And because over the last several decades, we've been in this convenience mode, right? How do we make eating easier versus how do we make eating better? And who's trying to make eating easier? The people that are selling you that easy food to eat, right? And so why is this such a challenging topic? Because it's confusing. It's very confusing. We've got a lot of interested parties trying to feed you, pardon the pun, right? Feed you information on what is healthy or not healthy, but they're not doing it they're not doing it for your benefit. They're doing it for their pocketbook's benefit, right? They're doing it for their investors and for all their shareholders, right? They need to make money. They need to be profitable. So they're going to tell you what you want to hear so that you'll buy their products, whether they're healthy for you or not. And not only do they want you to buy the products, but they want you to keep buying the products and eat massive quantities of it, right? So it's confusing. But at the same time, they're telling you that these things are good. Like, oh, it's whole grain, or it's heart healthy, or it's, you know, non-GMO, or it's gluten-free, or whatever. Like it's crazy. When you go out, just walk through the grocery store and you'll see things stamped with some of these signs that you're like, why are they even telling me this? Why does the marshmallow have to tell me that it's vegan or gluten-free? Or I mean, gluten-free marshmallows. Like, I don't really look at a marshmallow and go, God, I wonder how much wheat is in there, right? I mean, but there's a reason they do it. It's not because they want you to know that it's good for you. It's because they know that that's a popular, very, very popular thing right now, right? People are like, oh, I think I need to remove gluten from my diet. And so if they put that stamp on there, they'll go, ooh, it's gluten-free. It must be good for me. It's still a freaking marshmallow. It's still a marshmallow, right? Okay, a little bit of we'll spin back into that in a little bit, okay? But, so we know that chronic disease is a big issue. Outside of chronic disease, we've got a lot of other things to worry about that we can manage partially through diet, right? And we've got several members of our Legends program here, which is awesome. Something that we're always thinking about in that community, osteoporosis, osteopenia. So osteoporosis, we know, is weakening of the bones. Osteopenia is like the early stages when we start to see that weakening of the bones. We also have sarcopenia, which is basically a loss of muscle mass, right? And a lot of that can be managed through diet. Now, I pointed out the Legends, but guess what? They're not the only ones that need to be concerned about this, right? Because do you want to start worrying about osteoporosis when your bones are already weak? No, you want to start thinking about it earlier in life so you can take the strongest bones possible with you into later life so that you have a strong skeleton. You're not starting from an already weakened skeleton. Same thing with muscle mass, right? Why do we spend so much time working on strength here? Because we're trying to build muscle mass, because I want you to take as much muscle mass with you as possible into your 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and 100s. Trust me, it's a lot harder to build at 80 than it is at 40, 30, 20. So if we can build a bunch of it now, we can sort of bank it and roll with it, right? As long as we keep training. These are really, really important issues. Unfortunately, and I know it's not for lack of exercise, but one of our Legends fell a few weeks ago and broke her hip, right? So really, really important issue. Fortunately, she's doing well at 91. She's doing amazing. She's going home on Monday, right? She's gonna be going home from rehab on Monday at 91, right? So awesome, but what can we do to try to prevent those things from happening in the first place? Okay. All right, so I do want to talk a little bit about some physiology and just kind of how the body functions. Okay, just to give you some background on we talked about that 70% of deaths come from chronic disease. Well, why are we seeing all of this chronic disease, right? So we're going to start by talking about this concept of homeostasis, which is really just balance, right? So the body is constantly seeking a state of homeostasis, right? Or balance with regard to lots of things, okay? And one of the things that we need to keep in check or keep balanced is the amount of sugar we have in our bloodstream, right? So we think about this in regard to like diabetics. Like diabetics always have to be worried about the sugar in the bloodstream. We all have to be worried about it, right? Because too much sugar in your bloodstream is bad. Too little sugar in your bloodstream is bad. We need balance. It's not that we need none. It's not that we want a lot. We have to have just the right amount. And your body is very, very good at balancing it to a point. To a point, okay? And the way that we balance sugar in the bloodstream is through two hormones. We have insulin and we have glucagon. Okay? Probably heard of insulin. I know everyone's heard of. Glucagon maybe you haven't heard of, but they sort of work counter-regulatory to each other, right? They work back and forth. So insulin is a storage hormone and glucagon is a mobilization hormone. So here's how this works. You eat something that is sugary. You get an increase in sugar in your bloodstream after doing that. Your body recognizes this, your brain recognizes this and says, hey, there's way too much sugar in the bloodstream right now. So what happens is it signals the pancreas to release insulin, and then the insulin goes into your bloodstream and your cells see that and they go, there's too much sugar in the bloodstream. We need to take sugar out of the bloodstream and pack it into the cells, right? And that sugar can get packed into your cells to be used, like if you're exercising, like this morning, I went for a nice long run and I had some little sugary treats with me because as I started to get a little loopy and tired, I would hit a little bit of sugar and my body could use that sugar immediately, right? So my body recognized the sugar in the bloodstream and that sugar got pulled into my muscles, primarily my legs, and I was able to utilize that for the exercise. Unfortunately, the problem is too many people are consuming too much sugar and not doing anything about that excess sugar, and so that excess sugar then gets packaged away as fat, okay? So insulin is a storage hormone in response to elevated levels of glucose or blood sugar. Glucagon does the opposite. It recognizes when there's not enough sugar in the bloodstream. The pancreas releases glucagon and your cells go, oh, there's not enough sugar in the bloodstream, and then the cells, really simplifying this, it's a way more complex process than this, but the cells release the sugar into the bloodstream because your brain functions on sugar. Your heart functions on that. A lot of your organs need like that balance of sugar. So glucagon does the opposite of insulin. It releases sugar into your bloodstream, okay? And so, a lot of times insulin gets a bad rap because we think about insulin, we think about diabetes. It's not that insulin is bad and glucagon is good. They're both necessary. You have to have both. Without insulin, you have to inject it, right? So, the problem lies in the fact that, again, the standard American diet, the typical American diet, has way too much sugar. And when I say sugar, I don't just mean table sugar, although that is a problem. That is a problem. I think the average right now is 150 pounds. 150 pounds of sugar per year. That's the average American intake. 150 pounds of sugar per year, right? So part of the problem is that we're taking in too much table sugar, but think about all the other things that get broken down as and recognized as sugar. Breads, pastas, rices, potatoes. I'm not here to say that those things are necessarily bad. I'm just saying that that's how the body recognizes those. And if we consume those, we get too much sugar in the bloodstream all the time. And then we get the body saying, pancreas, pump out more and more insulin, right? So your pancreas is constantly pumping out insulin. And one of two things can happen. One, your pancreas just goes, done, can't do it anymore. I've made as much insulin as I'm gonna make, right? And those are people who don't have insulin, so they have to inject insulin, right? Or your body continues to produce insulin, but your cells are sort of like it's sort of like the story of the little boy who cried wolf, right? The cells are like, yeah, I see you, insulin. I don't really care. Like, I see you out there, but you're always there. You're always there, insulin, and I don't really care. So then the pancreas is like, fine, I'll put more insulin out there, right? And so finally your insulin levels reach a level where the cells go, all right, I get it, emergency. Yes, we'll start responding and pulling some of the sugar out of the bloodstream, okay? That is called hyperinsulinemia. Hyper, too much, insulin in the bloodstream. Constantly. So you can get this acutely, right? Just like if we went to Sly's right now, we just said, you know what? Let's talk about nutrition at Sly's. And we went to Sly's and we all got a doughboy, right? The one that looks like a gingerbread man. And we ate that. We would be in what we call an acute state of hyperinsulinemia, right? I'm not saying it's okay, but as an acute state, like if it happens once every blue moon, your body can handle that. That's what it's designed to do. It's when it's all day long, every day, for weeks, months, years, decades at a time that this becomes problematic, okay? And hyperinsulinemia, back in the late 80s, they recognized that hyperinsulinemia is tied to all of those chronic diseases that I mentioned before. So you can almost take any disease state you want and do the little Google machine search and put hyperinsulinemia plus cancer. You'll find a link. Hyperinsulinemia plus heart disease. You'll find a link. Hyperinsulinemia plus infertility. You'll find a link. Too much insulin in your bloodstream all the time is problematic. And that goes all the way back to the beginning of the story. It's a big part. It's not 100% of the story, but it's a big part of the reason that we're in the state that we're in right now, right? It's the reason that the death toll is so high. It's the reason that we can't control, despite knowing what we know, we can't control what's going on with rising healthcare costs and things like that, okay? So, great, I kicked this off and made everyone go, oh my God, we're screwed. This is a terrible situation, right? But the reality is, the fix is actually pretty simple in theory. It's always simple in theory. It's the application of the theory where things get a little mucked up, right? We're gonna talk about that too. We're gonna talk about ways that you can apply the theory in ways that work for you, right? Because what works for Helen might be different than what works for Connor. And so you have to figure out what's going to work for you, what's sustainable, right? That's one of the big buzzwords right now of everything. What's sustainable for you? What can you continue to do over time? Not over a 4-week period, not over a 2-month period, but what could you do day over day, week over week, month over month, year over year, and not feel deprived, right? Because that's not what we're talking about either. We're not talking about deprivation. We're not talking about making food a sad situation. I love food. I spend way too much time at night when I should be sleeping or reading, scrolling through Instagram reels, looking at food, trying to figure out where I want to go eat in Seattle and Las Vegas and you don't even understand all the places that my wife and I have tagged and earmarked that we're going to eat. It would take us years. We could eat at a restaurant every single day for years and not hit every place that we've earmarked as places we want to eat. I like food that much, right? But it can still be done in a manageable way. And that's what we're going to talk about right now. Okay. So there are a couple different things that we need to think about here. And so when we're thinking about improving the diet, one thing we always have to think about is, well, why? What's your goal? And everybody has different goals, right? For some, it's, I just want to lose weight. Okay. I would I would push back and say, good, but why? And then when you come up with your first why, like, I want to lose weight, why? And when you come up with that why, ask yourself again, why? And when you come up with that why, ask yourself again, why? When you come up with that why, ask yourself again, why? And it's somewhere around the 4th, 5th, or 6th why, you'll actually get to the heart of the issue, right? When you get to that why that almost like brings a tear to your eye, you're like, oh yeah, I found the thing. I found the actual reason, okay? But it could be, I want to lose weight. I want to improve my health. Okay, well, what do we want to improve in your health, right? What are you struggling with now, or what have you seen in your family tree that you don't want to have to face, right? Because we can control largely. Again, I'm not saying that this is the be-all, end-all, and we can end all chronic disease and we'll all live to 500 if we just eat the way I tell you to eat, right? That's unfortunately not the case. But we can certainly significantly improve our chances of not only living longer, but living better longer, right? Because the one thing that we're really good at right now, we are actually pretty good at getting people to live longer. Like if you look at lifespans, they're longer than they used to be for a host of reasons. But the problem is, for a lot of people, all we're really doing is extending the amount of time that they live needing assistance. And I don't know about you, but that's not how I want it. That's not how I want how I want to go out, right? I want to go out being able to do as much as I can for as long as possible. So I don't want to get 5 more years of having someone help me get dressed and do all that kind of stuff. I want 5 more years, maybe I want 3 more years of doing things that I want to do, right? And a lot of this can be done, again, through lifestyle, through diet, exercise, and other lifestyle factors that are sleep and those types of things, Okay, so first we have to come up with our why. What's your goal? And maybe you have multiple goals, right? And what we find is that we can attack all of those goals with a couple of considerations, and one is going to be quality. So the quality of our diet, and the other side of this is going to be quantity, okay? And a lot of times we get hyper-focused on quantity because the primary goal for most people walking through the doors of any fitness facility, I think it's like 85%, if you ask them what their number one goal is, it's to lose weight, okay? And so the conversation about diet often turns to quantity because it's a very effective way to lose weight, right? Legitimately, weight loss largely comes down to math, right? That whole idea of calories in versus calories out, right? Absolutely, I will not argue against the math there, okay? But I can present a situation where you go, oh, maybe it's not just math, Dan. You go to Costco and you see like with every season, they have a new type of like old-fashioned cake donut. Right now, I guarantee you they are chock full of pumpkin spice cake donuts. Right now, if you go to Costco, right? If you look at those cake donuts, each cake donut's about 400 calories, okay? So, for me, let's say I need about 2,000 calories per day. And so I decided 2,000 calories, these donuts are 400 calories, I'll just eat 5 donuts. That's 2,000 calories, right? So I do that for a while and I start looking at it, I'm like, oh, I think I would like to lose a little bit of weight. Maybe I'll only eat 4 donuts. Now I'm getting 1,600 calories, right? Will I lose weight? Yeah, of course, the math is better, right? I'm 400 calories less per day. Will I be any healthier? No. So for me, the question is about a lot more, which is why I want to dig into when someone says, I want to lose weight. Good, why? Because just losing weight does not guarantee that you're a healthier person. Ask anyone who has had struggles with anorexia. They were not healthier as a result of their weight loss. They were very effective at losing weight, but they were not healthier as a result of their weight loss. And actually, when they break it down and analyze anorexics, they're still their body fat percentage can be as much as 50% because they have little to no muscle mass. 100% not healthier. So, quantity is an important part of the equation, but if you hyper-focus on this, you can accomplish one tiny little goal and still not do anything for your overall health. So I think it's important to attack this from both sides, okay? So I'm gonna first talk about quality because I think it's more important. I think it's easier to manage. Now, there are some folks who are very analytical, like we've got a lot of folks here, nuclear engineers and stuff like that. They don't do well with just like, eat this, eat that. They wanna know like specifically, eat half a cup of this, eat a quarter cup of this, eat 4 ounces of this, right? I get that. That's the quantity side, but we can still marry the two conversations together, okay? All right, so when we're talking about quality, if we just strip it down to the roots, right? The simplest conversation we can have for quality is to eat, we're still gonna have to define this, real, whole, unprocessed foods, okay? There are a lot of different dietary strategies and schemes. I don't know what to call them schemes. It makes it sound like a trick. It's not a trick, right? But there's a lot of different protocols. Let's call them protocols out there, right? And so, back in the day, if you're an old school CrossFitter, we talked about what was called the zone diet, okay? And then from there, the conversation went to what we call Paleo. It's not a very good marker. Paleo diet, which we'll talk about in a moment. Right? Currently, really popular is Ketogenic Diet. Right? You'll also hear people talking about intermittent fasting. Not so much in the CrossFit space, but outside, out there, you're going to hear a lot of people talking about vegan, vegetarian, plant-based is the other term that's commonly used, right? Counter to that, yes, there is actually a growing group of folks, and I know many that are doing it. There is the Carnivore Diet, right? Yeah. Now, here's the thing. Here's what I believe. So people look at all this and they go, it's so confusing, Dan, because I know people that talk about doing the zone diet and they had great results. And I know people that went keto and they had great results. And I know people that took all the meat out of their diet and they said they had great results. And I know people that are only eating meat and they said they had great results. What do I do? Right? Here's what I think. Here's what we have to look for is what's the common denominator here? Right? And I believe that there is. I think even with vegan and carnivore, there's a common denominator, right? So we do this little thing where we've got vegan here, right? And then opposite end, we've got carnivore. Oh, you know, the other thing that you'll hear a lot about, like in the media, would be like the Mediterranean, right? And so we got, let's put that over here, Mediterranean. We could pick another one. We could go Paleo is a good one, right? What I'm interested in is what's the common denominator? What do they all share, right? And what they all share is this idea of eating real, whole, unprocessed foods, right? If you want to get the best results from a vegan diet, it's not from eating vegan cookies and whatever, like trying to make all these weird things out of vegetables. It's eating the damn vegetables, right? If you want to get the best out of the carnivore diet, it's eating meat. It's not eating things that look like meat or trying to make, no one's trying to make meat taste like vegetables. Everyone's trying to make vegetables taste like meat, but no one's trying to make meat taste like vegetables, right? Mediterranean diet, right? I mean, if you look at the Mediterranean diet, what is it? It's fish, it's nuts, it's vegetables, it's real whole foods. We go back to the early days of Paleo, right? Paleo was this whole idea of eating like the way our ancestors ate, or the way cavemen and cave women ate. That was the general idea. You did really, really well when you stuck to meat, vegetables, fruits, nuts, and seeds, right? But what did people do with it? They said, oh, so you're saying I can eat almonds on the Paleo diet? I'm like, yep, cool. What if I take those almonds and I smash them up and I make them into flour? Can I have eggs? Yeah, you can have eggs. Can I have honey? Yeah, you can have honey. Oh, cool. Could I have a little bit of dairy? Sure, you can have a little bit of dairy, or you could use almond milk. That's a good alternative. So anyways, they blend all those things together and they're like, ha ha, I made Paleo brownies. Right? So, the point I'm trying to make here, real whole unprocessed foods, how do you know you're eating real whole processed foods? You just know, right? Like it's the thing, I'll get to you in just a second. It's real whole processed foods are the things that you walk into the grocery store and you have no inclination to flip it over and look at the nutrition package because it doesn't have a nutrition label. A steak does not have a nutrition label. Broccoli does not have a nutrition label. Bananas do not have a nutrition label, right? Because you look at it and you instantly know, I know what that is. I know what's in there. That's a steak. That's beef. That's a chicken leg. That's chicken. That's a banana. That's broccoli. You instantly know what it is, right? And so there's like we have like a spectrum of like real, and then on this side would be fake, right? So on this side you can put anything. You know, you can put any meat, veggies, fruit. There's lots of things, right? On this side, I don't know, maybe a Twinkie. Right, exactly. Who knows what's in a Twinkie? I might know a couple of things. I know there's a lot of sugar in there. I'm sure there's some flour in there. There's a bunch of really crappy oils and fats in there, right? But you flip the thing over, and not only is the list this long, but you can't pronounce 3/4 of the words. If you flip the thing over, right, and the list is really long, that's the first indication that you've taken a step or two this way from real foods to fake foods, less real, okay? When there's words on there that you can't pronounce, again, like steak, like broccoli is like the longest name of cauliflower, broccoli, like those aren't that hard to pronounce, right? But polyhydrogenated bis5, 16, like what? It's not a real food, right? So we're looking to eat things that you instantly recognize as food. And again, there's a spectrum here, right? There are things that, I mean, we sell the stuff right up at the front. It's protein powders. Is that real whole unprocessed foods? Absolutely not. It's very processed, quite processed. Basically, they take milk and they strip out all the whey protein out of the milk through some process, right? So it is processed, but it's certainly not the same as being over here as a Twinkie. It's somewhere, probably over in here, right? Now, of course, you can take a few of these real whole foods and combine them together into something, and you're like, oh, I kind of wonder what's in there. And as you break it down, you start to recognize like, oh, okay, it's really just ground beef with some broccoli and a little bit of heavy cream or whatever. You can make some sort of recipe. Like, as long as you can break it down and you know all the ingredients are real whole unprocessed foods, you're doing probably pretty well, okay? But the less you recognize the foods, the less you recognize the names, the more likely it's down on this end and not promoting health. And not only not promoting health, but high chance that it's promoting this idea of hyperinsulinemia. Crystal, you got a question?
With regard to
Pasta,
pasta.
yes.
Where is it on that, and how bad is it if you have it pretty much daily?
Asking for a friend, right?
Yeah,
Yes, right, yes.
yeah.
So I know this person. So if you look at pasta, do you instantly know what it is? I mean, other than knowing that it's pasta. You don't, because it could be, nowadays, it could be semolina, right? It could be flour, or it could be like a wheat flour. It could be, look at all the different types of pasta that are out there. They take beans and mash them up and create flours. There's quinoa pasta, there's all different kinds of pasta. So we know we're not here.
Yeah.
We're at least a couple of steps removed from there, because I can't look at it and go immediately, I know what's in that, right? And then it sort of depends on which pasta you have, but I'm gonna say it's down here. Now, when we start to break it down and think about what does pasta contain, that's where you get into this conversation of what we're trying to get out of our food is macronutrients, right? Which is our carbs, protein, and fat, right? And so we know what's pasta. It's gonna be heavily carb, right? Which means it's going to be broken down into sugar, and it's going to create an insulin response. Now, understand what I'm saying. I'm not saying never eat pasta. I'm just saying understand what it's doing to the body, right? And it might need to be controlled, okay? But it would certainly be a few steps removed from real whole food. Again, depending on the type of pasta, right? Like if you're in Italy and they're making it right there in front of you, I'm eating it, right? I'm eating it. And it's probably a couple of steps closer, right? If it's in a box that can stay on a shelf for many, many, many years and still be consumed without any bad results, then we know that we're a few steps away, because now it's been stabilized, it's been preserved, there's been things done to it to make it possible that it could live as long as a Twinkie, right? Okay. So, with regard to quality, real, whole, unprocessed foods. If your diet, if your plate, if you could look at your plate and anyone could walk up and go, I know exactly what you're eating, you're doing pretty darn good. And you're doing better than, it's probably in the high 90 percentile of the rest of the people outside of these doors. Just by focusing on quality, real, whole, unprocessed foods. And we have many, many, many examples, and Jeremy and Sheila and Corey have been around in this gym. They've been around as long as anyone in this gym. So you've been here the days that we've done paleo challenges and things like that, right? And you've seen where people focused on nothing but quality and had amazing results, right? Quality counts. It's huge. It's a really big driver of health, right? And it's a really simple way to create a nutritious, healthy diet by just focusing on quality, okay? Now, let's go back. I'm not a zealot, right? I'm not here to tell you that I never eat anything that doesn't look like a steak. Though I could eat steak every day, but I don't, do I stray away from things? Yeah, absolutely, surely I do, right? But I try to live most of my life over here and then just visit over here on occasion, okay? Now, here's another important part of this conversation that we have to have, okay? Because I've heard people be critical of this side of it. So one of the things that I do is I go around and I teach seminars for CrossFit. So we teach people that want to become CrossFit trainers. And one of the discussions that we have at that CrossFit seminar is a nutrition discussion. So we're talking to them about very much a lot of these things, right? The other thing that happens on those seminar weekends is that the phrase in the seminar world is that Saturday is International Cheat Day, right? So all diets are off on Saturday evening after the seminar, and you'll see seminar staff like back in the day. It used to be crazy, you know, everything was crazier back in the day, but it used to be sort of crazy back in the day. People just sort of go off the rails on Saturday night, right? And then we get challenged, and people would say like, well, you're telling us we need to eat like this, but I saw you guys at the restaurant last night and you guys were not eating like this at all. You were all over here, right? And it's like, yeah, I mean, you called us out, like absolutely. This is the unfair part of life. And there's just no way getting around it. This is the unfair part of life. Some people are in a situation where their little indiscretions don't have as big of an impact on their life as it does for other people. Let me put this in different terms, right? Let's talk about money, okay? So if we were having a seminar about how do you not just build wealth, but how do you like get out of debt? How do you get out of debt? Like I'm mired in debt and I just can't get my head above water, right? And the person you're talking to is a really successful financial planner. They've helped lots and lots of people make millions of dollars, and in turn, they've made a lot of money themselves. Guess what? They sort of have that luxury to go out and buy the fancy car. They sort of have that luxury to go out and buy the bigger house, or sort of have that luxury to go on the fancier vacation. If you're trying to dig yourself out of a debt hole, you're not there yet. Again, I'm not saying that you can't every once in a while do something nice for yourself, but what I'm saying is that you sort of have to earn this side. And you earn this side by getting to a point where you live here mostly 80, 90% of the time, and then every once in a while you get to go play and have fun and visit down here. We're rolling into the season where everyone's gonna start living down here. We've got a few weeks, we're gonna have Halloween, right? And then we're gonna have Thanksgiving, and then we're gonna have Christmas, and then we're gonna have New Year's. And everyone uses, not everyone, yes, I'm gonna throw myself on the bus. Everyone uses this time as sort of like, I'll just get started later. I'll get started after the holidays. Well, what's coming up after the holidays? Everything else, right? Yeah, Valentine's Day. Like I gotta eat all the chocolates, right? And my sweetie and I have to go out for a fancy dinner, right? Here's what I'm saying. Like you can absolutely enjoy those days, but how many other days are there between now and the end of the year? There was a post on it on our Instagram and Facebook page yesterday or the day before, right? I don't even remember what the numbers were, but think about it. We've got all of October, November, and December. So we've got 93 days, 92 days, 93 days, whatever the math works out to. 90 to 93, 92, whatever, it doesn't matter. We've got 90 plus days between now and the end of the year. I just listed 4 holidays between now and the end of the year. So let's say you go off the rails on Halloween and you eat more candy than you actually hand out, right? And Thanksgiving, right? It happens, I know it happens. Hey, where we live, and we live right by Lions Park, we get like 1 or 2 trick-or-treaters a year. So guaranteed, we got more candy in the house than we ever give out. So I might eat more than I give out. That's not even a hard thing to do, right? And I've got 2 kids who I'm gonna raid their bag. We've got Halloween. Thanksgiving, and I know Thanksgiving food tastes better the next day, so I'm gonna give you an extra day there. So now we're at 3 days, right? You've got a Christmas party or 2, okay, for work and family. And then you've got actual Christmas Day, and then we got New Year's. We've got 7, that's 7 meals out of 90 days, 90 plus days. 90 plus days, that's, if you eat 3 times a day, it's 270 meals. So we're talking about 7 of those. Do you think that those 7 can outpower the 270? Absolutely not. Provided the 270 are largely this, then are you gonna be okay going here 5, 6, 7 times? Yeah, absolutely. And here's what we also know, if you live over here, your taste changes a little bit. And the amount of this stuff that you actually desire eating starts to go down. So when you do have it, you're like, that's not as good as I remember, right? And so you typically don't end up eating not as much of it, right? And you feel terrible when you do it. And so you're like, I need to get back over here now because I don't feel good when I do this. Okay. So by no stretch of the imagination am I telling you that meats, fruits, and veggies are all you can eat from here to eternity. Not telling you that. If you did that, you would be incredibly healthy. You might not get invited to a lot of parties. A lot of people might not want to come to your house for dinner, right? But you would be incredibly healthy. But it's not necessary to go that all in on this. Okay? Now, quality really, really matters, right? Now, what's something that we do in here with our workouts, right? We've got the whiteboard. Why do we have the whiteboards? Because we want to write down your workouts. We want to write down how you did on the workout. I want you to write down how long it took you, how much weight you lifted. We've got SugarWOD, which is the app that we use to track all of that. And that's not just there so you can give each other fist bumps and high fives and put comments on each other's workouts. It's there to track it. It's there so you know what's happening, right? If we got rid of all that, if we got rid of the SugarWOD, we got rid of the whiteboard, we got rid of the clocks, we never started a clock on a workout, we scratched all the numbers off the weight so you didn't even know how much weight you were putting on your bar. If we did all of that, but still did all the workouts, there's not any over here. If we still did all of those workouts, but had no numbers on it, would your fitness still improve? Yeah, of course it would. Yeah, provided you're still putting in a maximum effort into all of your workouts. If you didn't track anything, your workouts would get better. Would you be able to maximize your potential to get better if you didn't track all that stuff? Right? Because now it would be just like, hey, how'd that workout go? And you go, I don't know, it seemed like it went okay. Was it better than last time? I'm not sure, maybe. It felt a little better, maybe, perhaps, I don't know. So we sort of need some data. And that's where the quantity side of the equation comes in. That's where quantity is so important, right? So quality can help just kind of get things going in the right direction with regard to health, right? Quantity is how we maximize our health, okay? And there's lots of different ways to do that, right? So again, this is the one back in the old school days of CrossFit. Zone diet was one of the ways that we did that. Oh, you know what I didn't put on here was macros. Counting macros, which is basically just counting your carbs, protein, and fat, okay? So basically when it comes to quantity, what we're talking about is weighing and measuring your intake. How much food are you taking in? So we talk about the calories in versus calories out, right? So for that to work, you need to know how many calories you're burning. And I'm gonna tell you right now, this thing, it's garbage. As far as telling you how many calories you're burning, it's garbage. It's 100%. So this thing, it's garbage for everything except telling you distance, perhaps your heart rate, and your time, right? My watch here tells me lots of other things. Every morning it tells me how well or how poorly I slept, and every morning I argue with the watch. Every single morning. I'm not kidding. Every single morning I wake up and I eagerly look at my phone to see what it's going to give me for a sleep score, and I'll go, God, I slept really, really well last night. And I'll look at 60. And then the next day I'm like, oh, I slept terribly, and it's like, sleep score 85. It's just guessing. It's guessing based off of heart rate. That's it, right? I'm not listening. It's sort of like one of those things it's like I can't look away. I have the data. I honestly think I'm going to stop wearing a watch at night because I do wake up in the middle of the night and I go, oh God, am I going to screw up my sleep score? So I'm going to start taking this out because I don't think that data is worthwhile, right? And especially if you're stressing out about it. But at any rate, so we're talking about calories in versus calories out. You sort of have to, in order to get that right, you have to know how many calories you're burning, and there's really no honest way to 100%, with 100% certainty to know exactly how many calories you're burning in a day. And of course, that's gonna vary from day to day, right? Because there's some days that we don't exercise, there's some days that we do. There's some days that we're just going crazy, working out, and work is stressful, and all these other things, and we're burning a lot more calories, and there's other days that are easy breezy, right? So it's never the same. And so if we have like, I have a calorie target every day of hitting this number, well, guess what? Every day that calorie number is off. Okay, so what do? We look for generalities, we look for averages, okay? The other thing is calories in is also a little bit hard to get 100% dialed in and controlled. Like we could really go down the rabbit hole of this thing, because here's what calories in does. Calories in looks at how many calories did you actually take into your mouth, right? But it doesn't actually factor in how many of those calories your body actually absorbed. That's a big deal, because we're gonna take you back to this. And I'm not anti-vegan. I'm not against people who want to only eat vegetables, but there are some cases that they are making that are flat wrong, right? There are people that are making the case that broccoli has protein, and they're not wrong. There is protein in broccoli, right? And there are some people that will say, actually, when you break it down per gram, broccoli has more protein than beef. Here's the problem with that statement. What they're not telling you is all of that protein is bound to the fiber. And what do we know about fiber? You don't break it down. So guess what? You don't get to use the protein that's bound to that fiber. So it's a fancy term called bioavailability, which means, so let's say the food you're eating has 100 grams of protein. That's a lot. Let's say the food you're eating has 25 grams of protein in it. Bioavailability is measuring how much of those 25 grams can your body actually use. And when it comes to broccoli, the bioavailability of the protein in broccoli is like 5%. Right? The bioavailability of beans is like 50%. So if your beans say they have 4 grams of protein, you're only getting 2 of those grams. So the calories in, calories out becomes a lot more challenging when we start to factor in that kind of stuff. And no one is. No one is, right? So they're just guessing. This is about how many calories you need based on, and we do it here based on your muscle mass, based on your activity level, things like that. That's what things like the zone diet, counting macros, there's a fancy program out there called RP Strength. There's lots of other ways of counting your intake and then trying to use that to help you to get you to your goals. Okay, so wow, I feel like what I'm doing now is I'm kind of pushing away from thinking about quantity, and it is a very important concept. But I just want you to understand that it's not an exact science. Okay, counting calories, counting macros is not an exact science. So, what do I do now? Well, we just pick a starting point and we just go from there, right? So there are options out there, like I said, like zone diet, macros. You could just count calories, right? So you could just count calories. Well, how many calories, Dan? Well, I don't know. Let's just pick a number, right? I said earlier 2,000 calories. So for me, my target would be 2,000 calories. Okay. And so if my goal was to lose weight, remember I said I could just eat one less donut, right? Okay, let's assume I'm eating a good diet. I'm eating a relatively healthy diet, but my goal is to lose weight. So now I'm like, okay, well, maybe I'm gonna reduce my caloric intake by 20%. So now I'm taking in 1,600 calories. I'm gonna do that every day. Which means I have to weigh and measure, right? So I've gotta put my protein on a scale and see how many ounces it is. I've gotta get my measuring cups out and measuring spoons and all that kind of stuff and weigh and measure things so that I know with as much accuracy as I can get how many calories I'm getting. And so I do this for 1 to 2 weeks, and then I look at my results. Is my weight going down? It should be, right? What's happening to my energy? Is my energy going up? What's happening here in the gym? Am I still performing well on workouts, right? If after a week I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm melting, like I'm losing, like, and this happens sometimes. People will go too far, right? And they'll lose too much weight. And so I'm like, oh, no, I need to adjust this. And I go back up. Then I go back up to 1,800 calories, right? And I say, okay, we'll see what happens there. Or if I get there and I'm like, no, nothing's happening. So then I'm like, okay, I'm gonna drop it down to 1,400 calories, right? This is probably the simplest way you could do this. Be your own lab, right? Experiment on yourself. Start at a point, figure out what your goals are and how can we help you get to those goals, and then we just take baby steps to get there. Okay. Zone diet, I mentioned multiple times. Macros, how do they do this? They do it a little bit differently. They don't worry about they do actually worry about the calories. They just don't have you focus on the calories. They just have you focus on the carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. And so what they'll do, so we're talking about macros, what they'll do, depending on their philosophy, and there's lots of different philosophies out there, they'll say, hey, I want your protein to be 120 grams, and I want your carbs to be, let's just pick a number, 180 grams, and then I want your fat to be 60 grams, right? So every day, that's what you get. You get 120 grams protein, 180 grams of carbs, and you get 60 grams of fat. And so again, you have to weigh and measure, and then you either have to write it down and do the math, or there's apps on your phone that will take care of all of it and do all the math for you, right? And so at the end of the day, you're just looking to make sure you hit these numbers. Okay? It's another simple way that you can do it. Now, right now, well, back in the day, right? Back in like the 80s, 70s, 90s, fat was the villain. Right? We were told, that's why things like margarine and all that stuff came about, was to get rid of fat. Who remembers Snackwell's cookies? Yeah, I ate a lot of those terrible cookies. Fat-free cookies, right? Fat-free yogurt, fat-free cottage cheese. That's why all the fat-free things exist, because in the 70s, Ansel Keys, a researcher out of the University of Minnesota, did a study. He did a study. He didn't tell you that he ignored a lot of data, but he did a study. And basically his study showed that fat makes you fat. And everyone and their brother in the nutrition world since then has said he was wrong, but it's still a pervasive philosophy, right? So we vilified fat. Now, what are we vilifying? Carbs, right? Everything's low carb this and low carb that. That's why we have keto and all these other things going on, because everything's low carb this and low carb that, okay? No one's ever vilified protein, because we know that we have to have protein, right? And so when I think about tweaking someone's diet, I look at it this way. Protein is a button that you just have to push every day. You got to push the protein button, right? There's no dial. It's a button. You push it. You get that much protein. Whereas carbs and fat are levers, right? And so or they're dials, right? They're levers. You can turn them up, you can turn them down. Protein needs to stay constant. Carbs and fat, we get to play with, right? And so what we'll see is that you absolutely can do really, really well on a low carb diet if you turn down the carbohydrate lever. Actually, should I almost say it's like a seesaw, right? You can have a balance where your carbs and fat are pretty balanced, but if you would prefer to eat more carbs, you're gonna get less fat. And if you prefer to eat more fats, you probably need less carbs. But the protein's gonna stay the same. Does that make sense? Okay. How much protein does one need? It's a little bit variable. It's gonna really depend on how much muscle mass you have. Your muscle mass dictates how much protein you have. One of the reasons we want you to eat a fair amount of protein is to preserve muscle mass. Remember, so we started this off talking about sarcopenia, which is when we have a wasting away of muscle mass. And consuming protein is a good way to preserve muscle mass, right? So for the most part, what we're looking for is somewhere between 0.7 grams to 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight, right? So I weigh just a touch over 160 pounds, so I shoot for 150 to 160 grams of protein a day, okay? Depending on your activity level, that could go down a little bit, right? I'm fairly active, and so I try to get more protein, okay? Bodybuilders and such, you'll see them actually pushing this up to upwards of like up to 2 grams of protein per pound of body weight a day, which is a lot. It's a lot. Yeah, Corey?
So is that protein per current
Great question.
or goal?
Goal weight.
Or,
Let's go goal weight. Yeah,
okay.
goal weight. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good place to start is goal weight. And then these get adjusted. Okay. If you were to meet with one of us, so myself or Janae, to do nutrition coaching, we could, based on your goals, your activity level, based on your muscle mass and body fat and all that kind of stuff, we could help you figure out how many grams of all of these things you should be targeting, right? And then what we do is kind of monitor to make sure that these numbers are working out for you. Okay? So what we could do is help you figure this out. Now, again, here's what I know. There are some people who are looking at this right now going, there's no way. Like, if I were to have to weigh and measure every single thing that went in my mouth, that would make eating misery. I am not here to make eating misery. So what are we going to do here? We're just going to go, okay, let's start here. What are you currently eating right now? I want you to write down everything that goes in your mouth for the next 3 days. And then we'll just analyze it. And I can look at someone's food log and go, oh my God, you're not getting enough protein. Let me give you a simple little, let me share a tale with you. And this literally just happened this week. So I have a client that I work with, and this client told me that they started weighing and measuring all their food again this week. And their goal was, they're trying to do a ketogenic diet, which means this person is trying to get less than 25 grams of carbohydrates a day. A banana, right? The banana you were eating this morning after your workout is about 27 grams of carbohydrates. So that would mean no other carbohydrates the rest of the day. That's the ketogenic diet, right? And it works marvelously for many, many people, right? So again, you have to figure out who you are, right? Anyway, so this person told me that they were shooting for 1,600 calories per day. They said they wanted 65%. So 1,600 calories, and they wanted 65% of their calories to be protein. I'm like, okay, let's do the math on that. Turns out that that's 260 grams of protein a day. That's a lot. I've never eaten that much protein in a day. 260 grams, it's an obscene amount of protein, right? So I'm like, okay, that's a lot, but tell me what you're eating. Breakfast, no protein. There was a couple of grams. There was some coconut yogurt, and there was 5 raspberries and some coffee with cream. Lunch, 3 ounces of chicken or tuna, and then salad stuff. Dinner, 3 ounces of chicken or tuna, and a bunch of asparagus. I'm like, okay, I just did the math. You're getting about 40 grams of protein a day. You're shy 220 grams of your target. Right? So sometimes we don't need all these numbers. I can just look at your food log and go, okay, you're doing great on this, but we need to turn this down. We need to turn this up. Right? So first thing we do when we're coaching someone is we figure out, where do you live on this spectrum of like, what can you handle right now? Right? Let's be honest, how much inconvenience can you handle right now? Because it's gonna be a little bit inconvenient, right? Making big sweeping changes to your diet is a little bit inconvenient, right? But it's convenience that got us into the problem that we're in. So we need to be okay with being a little bit inconvenient for a while. But how inconvenient are you willing to be? Some people say, I'm all in. Sweet, we're gonna do this and this combined at the same time. We're gonna take out all the junk, and then we're gonna control how much you get. And those people are like, sweet, let's do it, right? And some people are like, no, I'm not gonna weigh and measure anything, right? Or, no, I still have to have a Twinkie every night. Like, all right, so that means we gotta weigh and measure. You don't get a whole Twinkie, you only get a quarter Twinkie. We can do it, We could absolutely do it, right? In the early days of the zone diet doesn't say you can't eat anything. Actually, macros doesn't say you can't eat anything. You just have to account for it. And so I actually have a friend who used to run a company, a nutrition coaching company, and his whole thing was he ate donuts every single day. He would go shopping and he would post pictures of his shopping cart, and it had Pop-Tarts and it had cereal and it had all this other stuff. Now, what he wasn't telling you is that he was having, a small serving of cereal in the morning, and then the rest of his day had to be this, because otherwise he was going to blow up his goals for his other, macronutrients. But every single day, I'm not kidding, the logo for his company was a donut. That's how serious he was about this. And he had 6-pack abs for days, jacked and tan, because he lived in Florida at the time. When he took his shirt off, you're like, I want to do what that guy's doing. And he was eating a donut every single day, because he was really micromanaging his quantity. Now, we could still have the health discussion. Is he a healthier person? I don't know. We can make that argument. Could he have been healthier? Absolutely, right? But if you measured his labs and stuff, he's probably pretty good, because he works out a lot. His all of his labs were probably pretty good. But again, so what we do is we figure out, who are you? What can you tolerate right now at this point? And then how can we leverage that into helping you improve your diet? Or how could you leverage that into helping you improve your diet? Okay? What baby steps could we take to get there? Right? It doesn't have to be wholesale, you've got to throw the baby out with the bathwater, I'm going to come over and go through your pantry and we're going to get rid of everything. It doesn't have to be that. It can be. It doesn't have to be that, right? It could be, Dan, I'm going to be honest with you, I drank 4 Pepsis a day. Can we make that 2? It's still too many, right? That's what I'm thinking in the back of my head, because when you come in and tell me, I only had 2 sodas today, awesome. That's great. In the back of my head, I'm still thinking it's way too many, but it's a step in the right direction. And if we could take that 2 and cut it in half again, so it's 1. And we take that and we cut it in half again, so I split a soda over 2 days. I actually had a good friend in high school. He didn't do it over 2 days, but he would drive to school sipping a Mountain Dew, and he would put it on his dashboard, and he'd take out his gum and put that on his dashboard, and then he would sneak out at lunch, and he would sip a little bit more of his Mountain Dew and chew his gum a little bit more. And then just before wrestling practice, he'd have a little bit more of his Mountain Dew. And then on the way home from wrestling practice, he would finish his Mountain Dew. Yeah. No, he wasn't. That was just Greg. That's just how Greg. He was savoring it, I guess, right? So, those are, again, I've talked about what the problem is. I know I've talked about a lot of things here, and it might seem really, really complicated, but if we just step back again, what's the key? The key is, I really believe the key is focusing on quality and trying to get the highest quality. And when I say highest quality, I don't necessarily mean the most expensive, grass-fed farm, not farmed, grass-fed, happy, super expensive steaks and all of that kind of stuff. That's not what I'm saying, right? I'm just saying the highest quality in that it has the least amount of stuff in it. It's the thing that you look at and you go, I know exactly what this is. There's one other simple thing I didn't talk about here. Here's another very, very simple way we can start talking about quantity, right? So here's what you can do. For the next several days, every time you make yourself a plate of food, take out your phone and snap a picture of it. Okay? And you'll start to get, over the course of several days of doing that, don't change anything. Just eat what you normally eat, but just snap a picture of it. Then, after 3 or 4 days, start flipping through some of those photos. Okay? And just be very analytical of how much you're eating. And look at it and go, well, how much of this is carbohydrate? How much of this is protein? And how much of this is fat? Okay? And then after 3 or 4 days, all I want you to do is, the next time you make your plate, try to make it a little bit smaller. Could you reduce the amount of food that you're eating a little bit? Right? It's the same idea. It's the exact same idea, and you snap a picture of it. And you make another plate, and you snap a picture of it, and you start comparing before and after plates. Are you consistently eating a little bit less? And then you're measuring yourself, whether that's through body weight, whether that's through just a tape measure, whether that's on an in-body scan, whether that's just putting on an old pair of pants that are kind of tight, and then every week you try them on, you're like, oh, they fit a little bit better, ooh, they fit a little bit better, then you know you're making progress, right? So it doesn't have to be weighing and measuring, it doesn't have to be like super complicated math. It could literally be just looking at your plate and trying to make your plate a little bit smaller. There was actually a study, right? So we have dinner plates, and then we have, well, that's supposed to be smaller. Then we have salad, I'll do things. Dinner plates, and we have salad plates, right? And this is not, one, because our dinner plates don't fit in our dishwasher very well. But at our house, we only use the salad plates for dinner. And they actually did a study on this, and what they found is that when you give people smaller plates, lo and behold, they eat less food, but they're just as satisfied, right? So they don't eat less food and go, oh my God, I'm so hungry because I didn't eat as much food. They look at it and they're like, I ate an entire plate's worth of food. I'm totally satisfied and full. There was another study they did way back in the day, and we tried to leverage this in college when we were really cheap and poor and ate a lot of pizza. But when you take a pizza, right, and if you cut it into 8 pieces, and you feed 4 college kids, they're gonna eat that and go, oh my God, that's all the pizza we get? But if you take that same pizza and you cut it into 16 pieces, and now they all get 4, and they're like, I'm good, man. I had 4 pieces of pizza. It's the same size pizza, right? Same concept here. I mean, you could literally, if you're using dinner plates, go to a smaller plate, and it's gonna automatically reduce the amount of food you're taking in without making life super complicated. Okay?
I think,
It's Alicia, right?
Alicia, yeah. One of the biggest problems, though, is what we don't count,
Well, you're right.
because it doesn't all go on a plate, right?
Yes, you're right.
You know, it's those snacks between meals or after dinner or
Yeah.
whatever.
But so the reality is they have to be counted in some way or shape or form, right? Whether it's just, all right, I'm gonna have a snack, but I'm gonna take a picture of my snack. And so that the next time I have a snack, I'm just gonna try to make that snack a little smaller, or see if I can eliminate that snack. And one really easy way to eliminate snacking is to make sure that you're getting enough protein. So I talked about protein being really, really important because it helps preserve muscle mass. But the other thing about protein is it's the most satiating of all of the macronutrients, right? We all know this, right? Like the running joke is you go out for Chinese food and an hour later, you leave the Chinese restaurant, you're like, oh, I'm so full, I can't eat anymore. An hour later, you're like, I'm starving. There's a couple of reasons, because what is this? It's the Chinese dinner, and I'm Korean, so whatever, right? The Asian meal, like I said Chinese, but it could be any Asian meal, which is heavily a lot of carbs, right? So carbs aren't very satiating. They don't keep you full very long. You break them down very, very quickly. The other side of this comes back to this, right? It's always gonna come back to this. So the carbs get broken down into sugar. Your body goes, oh my God, there is so much sugar in the bloodstream right now, and it just dumps a bunch of insulin into your bloodstream. And then your cells are like, red alert. There is so much sugar in the bloodstream that the cells just start indiscriminately packing up all the sugar in your bloodstream into the cells. And then your body goes, oh crap, now there's not enough sugar in the bloodstream. We could just release glucagon and tell the cells to, hey, all that sugar you just took in, release it. But there's a simpler solution. Eat more sugar. And that's what we end up doing. That's what we end up doing, right? So we eat something that doesn't keep us full for very long. Our body takes all that fuel and packs it into the cells and then goes, oh no, we don't have actually enough fuel to do the things that we need to do. Could you please eat more? And we're like, yes, I could definitely eat more. And so then we eat more, and then it becomes a vicious cycle, right? So, a lot of tangents here, Alicia, sorry. But one of the ways to eliminate some of that snacking would be to make sure that you're getting enough protein. And I would argue that most people are not getting enough, right? When we start to break it down, they're like, yeah, but I ate 10 almonds. That was the other thing this person told me. They ate 10 almonds. I'm like, yeah, that was a lot of fat. Fat's also fairly satiating, but it's not a lot of protein. It's mostly fat with a little bit of protein. Beans, mostly carbohydrates with a little bit of protein. Okay. Tofu, mostly carbohydrates, a little bit of protein. So yeah, there's protein, but when people try to sell you like, oh, they're really good sources of protein, and also a lot of that protein isn't available. Like you can't absorb it the way you could from a steak or chicken or shrimp or something. Did you have another question?
Well, I was just gonna ask, are carbs essential?
That is a great question. There's no such thing as an essential carbohydrate. There are essential fatty acids. There are essential amino acids. Amino acids are the building blocks of protein, right? So really when you're eating protein, what you're eating is amino acids that get linked together to create proteins, okay? There's essential fatty acids. So what the term essential means, your body cannot produce it. The only way you can get it is through your diet. And they're essential because you have to have them or your body won't function well without them, right? So there are essential amino acids, building blocks of proteins. There are essential fatty acids. There are 0 essential sugars. There are 0 essential carbohydrates because your body creates sugar, right? That's why the ketogenic diet works for people, right? So ketogenic diet means you run on ketone bodies or ketones instead of glucose. So you can actually get your body to flip over and start creating what's known as ketone bodies, and your brain functions really, really well on ketones, right? And the reason that works is because your body can break down fat and it can also break down muscle. You don't really want it to, but it can break down muscle and utilize that for fuel. And when it breaks down fat and breaks down muscle, it's creating glucose, and glucose is the sugar. So we can create it. It's called gluconeogenesis, if anyone's interested in that term, right? So yeah, there are no essential carbohydrates. That's not to say that carbs are bad, but your body can create them. David.
So, quick question. You go to the grocery store, let's talk about proteins for a second, right?
Yep.
Your common proteins you have are like the white meat, which is like chicken and stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Red meat is steak, ground beef, all that stuff, and you got your seafood, which is like salmon, fish, tilapia, whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
I've heard some doctors say that you need to avoid red meats, you need to avoid white meats. But is any one of them like better than the other? Should you incorporate all 3?
Well, so the answer to your first question is one better than the other. Depends on who you ask.
Okay.
Right? I mean, there's bias in all of it.
Okay.
Right? Now, my belief is that I think you do well mixing it up and getting all different types of proteins. But again, I think if we think about it, here's how I think about. This is why I do sort of drift toward this idea of the paleo diet, because basically paleo diet, the whole idea of that is eating the way our ancestors ate, right? And what did our ancestors eat? Especially here, around here, right? What did they eat? They ate a lot of red meat and they ate a lot of fish, right? I mean, it's what they had available. So for us to think like, eating red meat must be bad for you. Well, then it was terrible for us for millions of years. But we seem to do okay and get to the point that we're at eating that stuff, right? And if you're stuck in the plains, right? If you don't live here near water, if you're in Kansas back 10,000 years ago, what options did you have? Buffalo, red meat, right? So I think we did okay on it.
Maybe woolly mammoth.
Maybe woolly mammoth, which now is that red meat? I would think it's red meat, right? I don't know. But the point is, like, I think we do okay on more things than, I think right now we almost know, it's like we know enough to be dangerous, right? We know so much now that we start to overanalyze things and think like, oh, that can't be good for you. Like, we've been eating it for 99% of our existence. And we still got here, right? So I think we're doing okay. But I think getting a mix, right? This brings up another point, like how varied does your diet need to be? How much variety do we need to have in our diet? And I think that's I'll tell you that I have probably a slightly controversial counterculture take on that. I don't think it needs to be terribly varied. Because think about, why do we have it's September. Why do we have, it's September in Washington. Why do we have mangoes at the grocery store right now? Because they brought them from somewhere else. How long have we been able to do that? Only as long as there have been ships and airplanes, right? So again, for thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of years, we didn't have the luxury of eating 30 different plant foods in a week, right? I've seen some doctors that say, to maximize your health, you need to have 30 different plants in your diet every week. You talk about privilege. That's privilege. Like, that's a privileged life. I'm not saying if you did that, you wouldn't be healthy. Like, but man, we're making things really complicated. I don't think it needs to be that complicated. I don't think diet needs to be that varied. I think that's why people that do like the carnivore diet, and I know people that are doing it and thriving on it, and it's an exceptionally limited diet, right? I know some people that take carnivore to the point where they only eat red meat, right? And do exceptionally well on it. And their lipid panels, their blood work all looks fine, and they're healthy and doing great, right? Yeah. But going back to that, I think a varied, and one for like palate fatigue, right? Like, you can potentially, although I still think I could eat ribeye 3 times a day, every day for whatever, and not get sick of it. But yeah, for that reason, it's important. Yeah, Marlo.
So you were talking earlier about bioavailability, mainly in the context of vegetables. Is there a difference in bioavailability in animal sources?
In animal sources, I don't know at all. I do know, like, you get, like, with meat sources of protein, the bioavailability of the protein is like over 90%, right? Whereas in plants, it can be as low as, like I said, 10%.
We have things like eggs, cheese that kind of
Eggs
cross over into fats too.
Yeah, eggs. The bioavailability of eggs is pretty good. Dairy, I don't know as well. I don't know exactly that. We'd have to look into that. But yeah, I think when we look at dairy, right? If we looked at like just straight from the teat, right? The pure like whole milk, right? Straight, probably more bioavailable. And then as we start getting further removed from what that looked like, as we start getting into like fancy cheeses and ice creams and where lots of things get added, we're probably losing some of that availability. Yeah.
So I'm curious on your take on how you break out meals. So a friend of mine once told me that you should eat breakfast like a king, lunch like a prince, and dinner like a pauper.
Yeah.
You know, eating early. And I just read about different things now that's working out, and starting early and eating as early as possible and getting metabolism going. I'm just curious how you feel about that.
So, okay, how should you break up? Like, I'm going to try to take in 1,600 calories or 2,000 calories a day. How should I break that up? Should I front load it? Should I back load it? Should I do an even amount across? My answer is going to be it depends, right? There are people that do intermittent fasting that don't eat until noon every day or 1 o'clock every day, and they do just fine, right? What's that?
I'd be dead.
Yeah, I mean, it's an individual thing, right? It's an individual thing. So again, I think some of that, here's what I would say to that, Casey, is that one, let's get the top line here dialed in first before we start worrying about that kind of stuff, right? So that's, in my mind, that's what we call majoring in the minors. Right? It's like, I heard that I need to have an X amount of carbs and protein 10 minutes after my workout. If I have it 11 minutes, am I not getting any benefit? It's like, come on. You're only getting 50 grams of protein a day anyways. Let's get your protein up, right? So are we doing this? Are we getting the right quantity, regardless of how you break it up? Are you getting the right quantity in per day? Okay, good. Is it all high quality? Good. Okay. You still have some other goals that we're not quite meeting, then we start playing around with that kind of stuff, and it's going to be very, very individual, right? Because again, there are folks out there that highly recommend, and physicians and such that highly recommend this intermittent fasting style, PhD researchers that say intermittent fasting is the way to go. I just listened to a podcast with a PhD researcher out of, think he's at University of Illinois right now, and his primary area of research is protein synthesis, maintaining protein, so that sarcopenia, like how do we maintain muscle mass? And his philosophy was big breakfast, big dinner, light in the middle, right? And then there's others that say, eat breakfast like a king, like you said, and then, so eat big in the morning and then sort of start tapering off throughout the day. There are others that do it the opposite because they're doing intermittent fasting. And the reality is, if you talk to all of them, they'll all tell you, I'm doing great. So which tells you that there's some sort of intersection here. And I think the intersection is that they're all getting the right amount of calories and they're getting the right amount of carbohydrates, proteins, and fats that they need. And then they're breaking it up in a way that fits their lifestyle, right? And so, but I could have you do this and you'd be like, no, that doesn't fit my lifestyle, Dan. And so it won't work for you. So when someone says it doesn't work for me, it's not because the thing doesn't work, it's because it doesn't work for them, right?
Them or their bodies, the difference.
I don't think it's their bodies. I think it's, well, it's only part of the body that's here, right? I mean, because we think things won't work for us, but honestly, it's because we haven't. A lot of times, we haven't tried. I mean, I'll give you an example. I haven't had coffee. I didn't have coffee the entire month of September. If you would have asked me in August, how do you think you'll do without coffee? I'd be like, this is gonna be terrible. And it's actually pretty easy. I'm not advocating that you all get off coffee. I'm just saying, if you asked me a while ago, and I tried kicking coffee before, right? And then after I did it, I said, I'll never do that again. I'll never kick coffee again, right? But here I am kicking coffee again, and I'm doing just fine, right? So a lot of times it's not because we can't or it doesn't work for us. It's because,
Eating-wise, like,
what's that?
I meant eating-wise.
Yeah, no, it's just an example. It's the same idea, right? It's the same idea. Like a lot of times, here's the deal. I've done this zone diet and it worked marvelously. I've done Paleo diet. Guess what? It worked marvelously. I've not done any of these others real hardcore. I've done carnivore a bit and it worked pretty darn well. I was pretty happy with the results, right? If you would have told me, and this is the thing, like when my wife and I first decided to try paleo, which means no grains, which means no bread, no pasta, no rice. It means, strangely enough, no white potatoes, right? And so if you would have said, hey, Dan, how do you think you're gonna do this? I'd be like, this is gonna be terrible. I'm Korean. Are you kidding me? You're telling me I can't have rice and dumplings and all that stuff? Like, no, this is not gonna work. Guess what? It worked really, really well, right? So sometimes we don't know what's gonna work until we try it. Here's another example, going back to this paleo idea. Way back in the day, we had a member, his name was Ty, and we were gonna do a paleo challenge. So I think we were doing like a 4 or 6 week paleo challenge, which again meant, no beans, no dairy, no grains, right? No cereal, nothing, right? Meat, veggies, fruit, nuts. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So Ty comes up to me, we're a couple days, he's fairly new to the gym, and he says, hey Dan, I'm gonna do your little paleo challenge thing. And I was like, that's awesome, Ty. I'm glad to hear that you're jumping in on that. I look forward to seeing your results. And he goes, oh, but hang on, I'm not giving up my oatmeal. I was like, of course in the back of my head, I'm like, then you're not really doing the challenge. But I said, okay, Ty. I was like, you know what? You're a way bigger person than I am, and I don't think I could keep the spoon out of your mouth, so do what you need to do, right? So he comes up to me a couple days later. We still haven't started the challenge yet. He comes up to me a couple days later and he says, so I've been thinking about this thing, and I'm gonna give up the oatmeal. Yeah, if I'm gonna do this, he's like, I gotta do it all the way, otherwise I'll never know if it worked or not. I'm like, well, I agree with you. So he does the paleo challenge, and I'm checking in with him throughout the weeks, and I said, how's it going? He's like, and every time I checked in with him, he's like, oh my God, I feel so good. Like, this is fantastic. He's losing weight, he's doing well in the gym. Like, he's like, I'm not getting hungry throughout the day. Like, I feel so good. And so we get to the end of the challenge, and I said, what are you gonna do now, Ty? And he goes, well, I think I'm gonna have some oatmeal. Right? And I said, okay. So I checked in with him a couple days later, and all he said to me was, oatmeal is not my friend. Yeah. So, without getting too graphic, all I know is that he spent an inordinate amount of time on the toilet for the next couple of days. right? So sometimes you don't know how bad you feel until you feel better. And you don't know until you remove the thing. Again, coffee. I love coffee. My wife and I drank a lot of it. I'm sleeping a lot better. Despite what this damn thing says, I'm sleeping much better since I gave up coffee. Does that mean I'll never have coffee again? No, I think I will, but I'm gonna be a little bit more discriminate about it now. Yeah. Any other questions? What about alcohol? Does anyone want to know about alcohol?
Yeah.
Yeah, right, yes, absolutely. Okay, let's talk about alcohol for a moment. There's no essential carbs, there's no essential alcohols, right? Okay, here's the deal. In the mainstream media, and you'll find, if you look, you'll find studies that show 2 glasses of wine every day improves this and this and this and resveratrol and all these things, right? There is not a single person out there that will make the case that if you're not a drinker, you should start drinking for your health, right? There are many that will say, I'm not going to point because then it'll seem like I'm pointing at someone. I'm not pointing anyone out. There are many that will say, you should probably cut back on your alcohol because it will improve your health. Alcohol is not essential for health. I'm not saying alcohol is not okay. I had a couple glasses of wine last night, okay? Not saying it's not okay, but we cannot look, again, we have to, who's pulling the levers of telling us what's good for us and what's not good for us, right? And then how are they coming up with that data? Here's the problem with a lot of research in nutrition, and this is also why nutrition is so confusing, is because it's really hard to do really, really good studies in nutrition, right? Because the way you do really good studies is you control all the factors. So who's going to sign up for the study where they say, for the next 40 years, we control everything you eat? No one's going to do that. It's impossible to do. And no review board would sign off on that study because you can't do it. So what do? Is they go in and they go, hey, here's a group of people who all have heart disease. Let's ask them what they ate. Throughout your life, how often did you eat red meat? Throughout your life, how often did you drink? And here's what we know about human beings. We're really terrible at recalling what we ate yesterday, let alone 40 years ago. So all of those studies they're weak at best, which is why we get a lot of conflicting data from those studies, right? So one group can go out and do a study and they're like, hey, red wine's good for you. And then another one goes out and says, no, it's not that good for you, because you can sort of pick and choose your data set, right? So what did I say about alcohol? I didn't say anything about alcohol. Again, I'm not here to tell anyone that it's not okay to consume, but we do always have to go back to, did I write it anywhere here? God, it's like one of the most important things. So we always have to go back to, what are your goals? And whatever you're about to put in your mouth, whether it's alcohol, whether it's a Twinkie, whether it's a steak, whether it's a protein shake, whatever it is, will that help you take a step closer toward your goals? If yes, great, go for it. If no, you've got a decision to make, right? Sometimes that decision is, no, it's not gonna help me move toward my weight loss goals, but I'm celebrating my best friend's birthday, and I'm not gonna be that person who says, sorry, I can't do any of this stuff, right? So in that way, it's supporting you, right? You know what I mean? Like, you have a decision to make, and it's okay. There's a great book, it's called Will It Make the Boat Go Faster? And it's all about this decision-making process, right? So the book is about the British rowing team. So the British rowing team was always one of the best rowing teams in the world, but also a flop of a team. Like, just never produced. Like, they would get to the world championships and they'd get to the Olympics and, right? But they were one of the best rowing teams in the world. And so they had a decision to make. Like, the board that runs all of this in Great Britain said, you know what, we're actually thinking about getting rid of the rowing team because you guys just aren't producing. We're putting a lot of money and effort into this team and you're just not producing. And so they basically had one last shot. And I don't know if it was a coach or if it was one of the athletes that basically came in and said, hey, here's our new philosophy. Our new philosophy is this. with every decision that we make, personal or team-wise, we're gonna preface that decision with, will it make the boat go faster? Hey, we're gonna start doing 2 workouts a day now instead of 1 workout a day. Will it make the boat go faster? Yeah, because we're gonna become a stronger team. Cool, then they started doing that, right? And so everything was like, whatever it was, like, we have a birthday party to go to. Well, will going to that party make the boat go faster? No, probably not, because I'll probably overeat. So I won't go to that birthday party. So they prefaced everything with that question. And spoiler alert, they won the world championships that year, right? Now, sometimes, again, this kind of goes back to what I was just talking about. Sometimes you're going to ask yourself, will it make the boat go faster? And you'll say, no, it probably won't, because I probably will drink a little bit too much, and I probably will have snacks that I shouldn't have, and that will not help the boat go faster. But it's been really stressful. I've been really stressed out for the last 6 weeks. I need a little bit of a break, and that's going to help me mentally. So then you go, yep, it won't make the boat go faster tomorrow, but in the long run it might. Though that's a little bit more nuanced, and that's a little bit more challenging. Like, I can't just sit here and go, you need to make that decision, right? Like, that's a very, very personal thing. But if 90% of the time you're choosing the thing that will make the boat go faster, or 90% of the time you're choosing the option that will take you, even if it's just a small step toward your goals, then eventually you'll get there in the long run, right? But if more often than not you're making decisions that either won't move you forward or potentially will move you backward, that might be why people are stuck where they're at. This reminds me of something, going back to the alcohol thing. So it's not, again, I'm not anti-alcohol. We know that by adding alcohol to the program, it's not gonna actually boost your health. One of the biggest problems, and sure, there's empty calories in alcohol and all that kind of stuff, we can talk about that. One of the biggest problems is what happens after the alcohol, right? Like last night, when I got home after having 2 glasses of wine, and I came home and we hadn't had a very good dinner before we had wine, and my youngest daughter royally screwed up making a pizza, and there was a soggy, half-cooked pizza on the oven, just sitting there, and I ate the whole thing. Soggy pizza and all. Yes, because we make really poor decisions after alcohol. So that's often where the problem lies. It's not the alcohol in and of itself. Sometimes it's what you mix with the alcohol, because a lot of times it's sugar, right? Or some sugar derivative. But then it's the transgressions we make after the alcohol, right? So that always has to be considered. All right, any other questions? Now, I have a little sign-up sheet here. If you are interested in a nutrition consultation with myself or Janae, you're not signing up for anything. You're not being charged anything for this. This is just an opportunity to sit down with us and say, where are you at? Before we schedule this though, I'm gonna give you some homework, right? You're gonna have to come in telling me what you currently eat so we can talk about changes that you can make, right? But this is an opportunity for you to do a nutrition consultation. And if you want, the most powerful thing that you can do to help you move toward your goals is have someone hold you accountable, right? When there's someone that you're answering to, the likelihood that you're gonna make better decisions increases significantly. So right now it's myself and Janae that are doing the nutrition coaching, and we have room for about 5 to 7 new clients. Like if you decide that you wanna sign on for nutrition coaching, we have room for about 5 to 7 clients, and that's it before we can sort of like close it down so we can maximize the service that we provide. So if you're interested in just having a conversation with us to see if you want to move forward to that, or just having a conversation with us, please sign up right here. And outside of that, that's all I have. Thank you very much. If you have any other questions, do not hesitate to reach out. When you're in the gym, do not hesitate to ask questions, okay? Thanks for coming.